My end. Can you?
No, the microphone's not working. Now, this might be by popular demand. A few people said, can you switch his mic off? Oh, hang on a minute. Now, Phil can hear Richard fine.
Ah, so
you can hear Richard fine.
It's all your fault.
Okay. Well, then it's possibly me, isn't it? Then so, Richard, say hello.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
I genuinely can't hear you. Hang on. Right. My speaker is there. Is it off? That's really interesting. I'm going to test my speaker. Hang on. Yes, my speaker's working. I will. Right, Rich, you're going to have to do that while I sort out my speaker.
Okie dokie. Still not working? No? Okay, let's jump into some comments then. Yeah, Phil says you can hear me fine. Hey, Herbert, how we doing? And everyone else can hear me. So it's just Steve that can't hear me. I guess Steve doesn't want to listen to anything that I have to say. So while Steve is fiddling there, are there any questions that you guys have that we can?
Richard,
can you hear me now? Still nothing.
Right.
No.
So I can't hear you, Richard. So I'm going to my speakers for some reason. It's not working. So I'm going to switch it all off and switch it back on. But yeah, as people can hear you, you carry on.
Okie dokie. Do you guys have any questions while Steve is sorting some bits out there?
The wonders of modern technology.
And if not, in the meantime, I'm going to open up some research I've been doing. Yeah, on?
Yeah, on? Yeah, wow. And super loud.
Very loud.
Very loud.
Right. Well, that was
delay.
Good. Delay. There's a delay, is there?
Yeah, I think there's a delay, yeah.
I think there's a delay, yeah.
Oh, okay. But you can hear me now, can you?
We can hear you fine.
Can hear you fine?
All right, great. Okay.
But I can also hear myself in the background.
Right. Okay, let me turn it down a bit then. What about now?
Yeah. Any better?
Any better?
Yeah, I can still hear
it. You can still hear you?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, right. Well, it's the same setup as always. I don't really understand why that is.
Love that comment by Sabrina. Do you know, I've been up to see a friend of mine today who I haven't seen in over a year. And that's the first thing that he and his wife said to me is that I look younger now than I did last time they saw me. So I guess that's the benefit of being keto and carnivore. But yeah, it's amongst other things, no doubt. But yeah, Benjamin Button, aging backwards.
You do look younger, actually. You do. Definitely.
Well, I've cut my hair. I've had a shave.
Well, that's going to help.
Yeah, but yeah, do you know? I'm feeling the healthiest and fittest that I have ever been. And what month we know? September. In 3-4 months' time, I'll be breaking into my 40s, and I genuinely feel as if I am still in my teens. I would run circles around my previous self at any point in my life. So yeah, kudos to the lifestyle and the production of ketones, I guess, isn't it? But yeah, it's interesting because when we look at NAD+, which is an integral part of the electron transport chain, there's a conversion of NAD+ to NADH. Now, NAD+ is incredibly important. And if you think of your cells in your body as when they age, it's as if they're being photocopied. So think of when you take a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, they become more faint over time. And this is what happens with our cells. So as our cells reproduce, they become less effective, if you like. So it almost photocopying themselves. And this is to do with the NAD+ to NADH ratio. But as we age, NAD+ declines naturally, but it doesn't have to decline at the rate that it does with most people, because it costs the body 4 NAD+ molecules to process one molecule of glucose, whereas the ratio with beta hydroxybutyrate or ketones is 1. So in effect, ketone production is 400% more efficient at creating and utilizing energy than glucose is. So this means that we maintain a higher level of NAD+ to NADH for longer periods of time, so later in life, which is one of the detrimental effects on aging is this decline in this ratio. But yeah, it just adds further weight to the fact that being keto and carnivore, I guess, is highly beneficial to health, well-being, and the effects of aging. But appreciate that. It's made my day.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. People have got to look at the evidence of their own eyes. I think Sean Baker did a thing on Instagram today where there's like a split screen, a remix, and there's some doctor talking about how bad it is to eat meat for your GI tract, and giving all the science of why red meat must be doing this, that, and the other. And I was thinking, well, I actually posted it, and I said, well, everybody I deal with that eats this way seems to see an improvement in their gut health. Talking of which, Phil Richardson was one of those people that was having terrible trouble, and he's posted a question there, or not a question, but a statement. Dr. Kilt's last week was amazing, but I got very lost in the science. And I think many people do, if you don't look into glycoproteins. Maybe I should be on the screen as well, by the way.
Yeah, it's not so good when I've got to look at my ugly mug. But my young ugly mug, I may add.
And I think, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, Phil, but it can get quite deep. But if you go back into what actually they're talking about, for instance, if you think of the membrane of a cell, it will have a protein sticking out, and on that protein will be a sugar. And it really is down to all of that. And a lot of medications are looking at, the sugars are part of the target for certain things. So they target it for a medication. So sialic acid, which is a sugar, which is very prevalent on the outside of cancer cells, for instance. They look at medications that target those. And then when something enters that cancer cell, I mean, this is trying to make it very bite-sized. What they've realized is that, for instance, actually, let's go on to a virus. So if you put a virus into that cell, when it leaves the cell to then go off and to replicate, it is actually the removal of all the sugars that makes that possible. That's one of the things they're looking at in medication. So that's all it is. It's just saying that there is a role there, and the role is being researched, and it's a bit more nuanced.
I noticed as well, Steve, in the comments on last week's presentation with Dr. Kiltz, there was a question, from what I can remember, in regards to, do I need to watch my protein intake because of gluconeogenesis and the production of glucose? Now, we covered this in on the other channel that we switched over to. No names mentioned, which I'm sure you'll explain why in a little while. This is why many of the listeners couldn't get on. So we did go into a little bit more detail and explain this a little bit better, didn't we? But we're told to fear glucose and sugar, but the fact is that the body needs sugar. The erythrocytes or red blood cells need glucose, and the hippocampus and the brain can only be fueled. It's fueled by a few different GLUT transporters, but one of those is GLUT4, which is insulin glucose.
Rich, can I just interrupt and say, we're not talking dietary sugar. We're talking about sugar that the body makes.
Which is where I'm going with this now. So we don't need any dietary sugar. The body will create any sugar that it needs through a process called gluconeogenesis. So sugar is not essential whatsoever. And I would argue quite the opposite. But the body does create glucose. But this whole thing with glycosylation against advanced glycated end products is that they act in different ways. So one is a chemical reaction in regards to the glycation, and the other is not. It's a natural reaction that occurs when sugars bind to certain cells in order to create specific signals. So if we look at DNA within the human body, we don't have an awful lot of DNA when we compare our DNA to other animals, such as birds and flies. Or it's only fractional. So you'd think that we would have 10, 20, 50, 100 times the amount of DNA, but we don't. We only have a few thousand extra DNA. So the way that the body reacts with this is it does so through glycosylation, where the sugars will bind to our DNA, our human DNA cells in the body, and it will allow those to create signals in order to upregulate hormone production or fight inflammation or whatever it may be. So that's the difference, the basic difference between glycation and glycosylation. So one is advantageous to the body, but we don't need to consume dietary sugar in order to benefit from that. And the other, again, is a chemical reaction through excess sugar consumption, where cells will become sticky because these sugar proteins will bind to our cells and create oxidative stress, glycation, and lots of downstream deleterious effects within the body. So one is beneficial, the other isn't, but one is created through excess dietary carbohydrate or glucose consumption, and the other is something that happens naturally in the body without consuming any glucose consumption whatsoever, and it's done so through the process of gluconeogenesis. So how is that for a simple explanation?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I just will always say, we will get to your question. So Anne Wright put this on about 9 minutes ago. So there is a little bit of a time lag because we try to sort of give everybody a fair shout when they ask something. We don't just skip over. So Anne is asking something. And the other thing is, yes, this carries on at 8 o'clock on a different platform. And I will have a much better link to put into the comments for you. But anyway, so Anne Wright is saying, hi guys, my elderly friend has ulcerated legs caused by poor circulation. Would an improved diet such as keto carnivore help with this, and how?
Yeah, have you got any thoughts? I mean, generally, keto carnivore improves every aspect of health and well-being. Circulation is down to a number of factors. Inflammation is one, which keto carnivore tackles almost immediately. The production of the ketone body, beta hydroxybutyrate, blocks a pathway called NLRP3 inflammasome, which is responsible for these inflammatory cytokines within the body. So becoming ketogenic or even low carb will see this reduction in insulin and will allow for better blood pressure as well as better inflammation. Because one of the other things that leads to poor circulation is bad blood pressure. Again, number of causes, but insulin resistance is the main contributing factor to high blood pressure, because when insulin is elevated, it pulls sodium from 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys back into the blood, and wherever sodium goes, water follows, which leads to high blood pressure. But sodium was not the initial cause of the high blood pressure. The high blood pressure was caused by insulin resistance. So when you become low carb or ketogenic, insulin quite literally begins to drop overnight. This now signals the kidneys to release sodium from the body, which leads to keto flu, which is why it's incredibly important to make sure that you're obtaining enough sodium and potassium within your diet. But as this drops, so does the blood pressure. So, I've seen people improve blood pressure quite literally overnight, certainly reverse what is deemed as essential hypertension within a week or two comfortably, and circulation issues for sure. All of these things come hand in hand. So when we begin a low carb keto carnivore journey, all of these things begin to clear up. And I think, Steve, we quite often tout this, as, or perceived to be the magic elixir, isn't it? This is, the benefits that we tell people that we see. And this is, based on our own research and our own benefit or our own experiences in regards to things that we have seen improve on ourselves. So it isn't just the weight loss, it's the improvement in mental clarity, health and well-being, skin conditions. One of the things, actually, I don't know if you know this, Steve, but I was told years ago that I was sterile and I would never have children. I don't know if I've told you that. And no. It was only recently when I was talking to a client of mine, So I won't go into too much detail with this, but I went for, my wife and I would try, I'll try not to go into too much detail. My wife and I were trying for a little baby, and years went by and nothing was happening. So I went to be tested, and basically the long and the short is that the doctor told me that I would never have children because my sperm count was incredibly low, the motility was incredibly low, and basically the sperm that was there wasn't strong enough to do anything. So that made me incredibly depressed because I thought, well, this is something that I've always wanted. And now it's, that's all part of life, isn't it? We go through life, we grow up and we meet somebody, we procreate and we have children, and, you teach your children all the things that you've learned in life. Is just the natural progression, isn't it? And to be told that I would never have children was incredibly damaging, and it put me into a downward spiral. Super long story short, I adopted a keto lifestyle. I maintained this lifestyle for a little while, and I decided to go back to be tested. Not because I was ketogenic. I didn't realize this was going to have any impact whatsoever. But I went back almost for a second opinion. So I got tested again. Now, my sperm count was something, and don't laugh, something like 20 times higher than the normal average, which was like 100 times higher than it was in the previous test. And the motility was around 60%, which is basically, how mobile the sperm were. Basically, anyway, on the second occasion in attempting to build a little baby, my wife caught. So basically, this is incredibly healing and repairing to the body, and it seems to be this magic elixir that there's always we always give the same answer, don't we? Eat these foods, remove these foods. To someone in the general public, it almost seems impossible that one thing could have all of these positive effects, but it makes perfect sense, because when the body is working the way that it should, then everything else works the way that it should. The body works the way that it should through our hormones. And when our hormones are in check, then everything else seems to follow suit. And what puts our hormones back into a normal, or I say a normal range, quoted, it's lots of natural fats. Fats, particularly saturated fats, choline, create hormones. What are we devoid of in our standard diet? It's saturated fats, it's cholesterol, it's choline, because we're told to avoid them. We're told these saturated fats are bad for us. We're told that animal proteins are detrimental to our health. But every cell in the body is made of protein, and every cell in the body is made of fat. If you restrict protein because some idiot has told you that it causes cancer, or if you restrict fat because some idiot has told you that it's going to lead to obesity, my body fat is single figures, and I consume lots of protein, lots of natural fats. I'm 107 pounds leaner than I was when I was type 2 diabetic and clinically obese. And that's what I eat every day. These foods that we consume affect the way that our body works. And when we feed it the nutrients that it needs while removing the products that are responsible for the damaging effects, and this is high carbohydrate through this glycation that we mentioned, as well as these oxidized seed oils, which lead to insulin resistance at a higher level than carbohydrates do, by the way. When we begin to remove these and these other foods then that contain other things like phytic acids and lectins, then suddenly the gut begins to heal. The body begins to heal, because when the gut is permeable, the body creates antibodies to fight these lectins, or these proteins that are in the bloodstream, and through a process called molecular mimicry, the body starts attacking other proteins within the body that look the same. Now, how is your body meant to be running at 100% efficiency if it is constantly repairing issues within your body? If your body is damaged, then your body is going to be tired because it's constantly fighting off this damage. Once you remove these foods and you consume the natural fats and the natural proteins, then the body begins to heal. So that, and apologies, but that is my long explanation in regards to why living this lifestyle can certainly help. At least I believe so anyway, and in my experience.
Yeah. And I think because Anna's mentioned that she's been told it's caused by poor circulation, it's probably best to just clarify what that means for people that are listening that are interested. You can have venous insufficiency. That's basically when the blood is returning to the heart. There's not enough. Well, there's many reasons for it, but there's like little valves that, as the blood goes up, those valves stop it going back down. So that can cause a problem. And they, as Richard has just said, they could be being damaged all the time, whereas they can repair. You can also have arterial damage. And we've seen on carnivore, low carb and keto that people have more elastic arteries after eating this way. Some of the scales do a thing called pulse wave velocity, which basically sends an electrical signal up your arteries. This is why blood pressure goes up when you get older, because the arteries are very elastic when you're younger and they get stiffer. And that can be reversed. So that's the other reason why this might be really helpful. But just to go through, there could be other reasons. You've been told it's by poor circulation. Don't know how that's been established. I'm assuming that's okay. But if you've got like an infection, obviously that again can be helped with this way. If you've got skin conditions like eczema or psoriasis, we've seen people reverse those things on this way of eating. Really major problems have been reversed. I've got a couple of success stories on my channel. You can also have infections, but you tend to be less prone to infections with this way of eating. The only time I think it might be difficult is if it's like a trauma or an injury. Something's cut into your skin and caused that problem. Then diet isn't as important as treating it topically and all those sort of things. But in the end, even with that, this way of eating is going to give you a sort of a better environment. Going to move on. So yeah, I can't stress enough that we will get to every question. All right. So if you've put a question in and think we're ignoring it, we're not. We're just trying to give a really full answer as we just did then. So Cat Whisper. Yeah, I thought I misread that and thought it might be Cat's Whisker. But anyway, Cat Whisper is very good. Can you explain the importance of grounding?
I wasn't laughing at the name, Steve. I was laughing at the fact you said about giving a detailed explanation, because I just went off for 5 minutes. Sorry.
No, you're passionate about it. And actually, this is one of the problems with people that come this way of eating, isn't it? You're so passionate. You want to tell everyone, and you fall into that vegan trap of wanting to go to everybody. Oh, you're a bit overweight. Do this, can you explain the importance of grounding? Well, grounding is based on the principle that your bare feet touching the earth will allow electrons into your body, and there's plenty of studies that show that is beneficial. You can look at blood under the microscope of people that have not grounded and then grounded, and you can see the difference. Heat maps as well have been taken of people, and of course anecdotal. I started grounding and I felt better. I slept better. We have a grounding sheet. I'm barefoot as much as possible, to the point where, even my sprinting I'm doing in barefoot trainers. When I go back to shoes now, my feet complain. So I think there's a different benefit of not being in shoes. So a bit like carnivore, keto, low carb, it's not just the good food that you're eating, it's also the bad food you're not eating anymore. Same with grounding. I think the more you're barefoot, you will be doing other things. Like many people do the grounding first thing in the morning, so they get sunlight on their eyes. They're out of their house, you see. So maybe before they did grounding, they sat in the kitchen and they had a bowl of cereal and they didn't see the sunlight. They had a fluorescent light on. So I think the importance of grounding is definitely there. It's getting you outside. It's getting you in contact with the earth. I just feel there seems to be a lot of science behind it as well. But Kay's got quite a few videos about bits and pieces. Yes, it does sound a bit woo-woo to some people, and if you don't really like it, fair enough. But there's lots of science out there sort of backing it up. I don't even know what Rich feels about it, and he might think completely the opposite. But anyway, what do you think, Rich?
Yeah, it's not something that I've studied extensively, but the studying that I have done does show a big upside, and you've just covered everything. I've got nothing to add to that, Steve. I think that's an area that you are well versed in compared to myself, but it is something I try to do. And I believe it's beneficial. So, it's a case of adding up all of these little 1%, isn't it? Because all of these 1% add up over time. And if this is going to make you feel, even if it is anecdotally, and you're going to feel a little bit better, then it's worth it just for that, isn't it?
Cool. TLV, hi, hello, fellas and carnivores. The past couple of days, I've been adding the greasy fat at the bottom of the air fryer after cooking meatballs. Is there a reason for this? I think you've miswritten that question. There's not really a question there, is there, Rich? Or am I being particularly
I'm
stupid
guessing
tonight?
that they've probably began adding the greasy fat at the bottom and maybe feeling a little bit better, possibly. But that,
okay.
yeah, I mean that's my interpretation. But that would be the saturated fats, and your body loves saturated fats. The saturated fats are the healthiest fats for us. Now there are lots of people who would argue that olive oil is more beneficial than avocado oil, but there's a study that I've referenced in one of the talks that I've given, and it looks at the oxidation properties in things like lard, butter, tallow, ghee, all the way up to things like olive oil, avocado oil, and then into the seed oils. And the saturated fats, anything hard at room temperature, is the least likely, the least likely to oxidize, and carries the biggest benefit for health and well-being. So I'm assuming that the greasy fat at the bottom of your air fryer is hard and is saturated. So anything hard at room temperature is beneficial, in my opinion, at least. And I try to get lots of that in.
Now, some people, we're guessing what that question is, but rendered fat, which is when it's liquid and it's been cooked, that can be problematic. So for instance, if you are, for some people, if you're doing ground beef and you put that in a bowl and you just have minced beef with a bit of butter, and then you get the pan and you tip that hot liquid fat on, some people find that difficult to digest. That's rendered fat. But if it's gone back hard again, then it tends to be okay. So, right, trying to cover every single question. We're still only to the first 5 minutes of questions, and we're already nearly halfway through the hour. Anyway, Sash mode. Hiya, guys. If you do very intense, there you go, all in capitals, weightlifting / power cleans and push presses, does your body make sugar gluconeogenesis for the fast energy it needs, and will it knock you out of ketosis? I mean, I am doing a video right now of my ketones and glucose readings, and yes, every single time I did something intense, and that included just sprinting, my glucose went up. But that's to be expected. So yes, your body does make sugar, as we spoke earlier, through gluconeogenesis to meet the demand, the extra demand you're putting on it. Does it knock you out of ketosis? Sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, which is the whole reason I did this experiment. That's not bad to be knocked out of ketosis, because your body is doing what it should do. It's responding to its needs. So I can't remember off the top of my head exactly the numbers, but I would see my blood glucose go up from maybe 4.6 to as high as 6.9. But I do work out very hard, and my ketones might have been 0.8, or it might have been 1 or something like that when I first measured it. And then after the exercise, it might be 0.8, 0.4. But a couple of times it was actually slightly higher. So I think my body was collating as much energy from all over my body. So in answer to that question, yes, it does make sugar via gluconeogenesis, and yes, it can knock you out of ketosis. But I'm going to add a little thing on there. Don't sweat over not being in ketosis all the time. You don't have to be in ketosis 100% of the time. In fact, I would say that's the least of the things I ever think about with this way of eating.
Yeah, and it's not the sugar per se, it's that insulin to glucagon ratio. And that insulin to glucagon ratio that allows us to be ketogenic is only impaired during exercise. Your body will come straight back. Testing after extensive exercise is probably one of the worst things or worst times to test because of peripheral insulin resistance. First thing in the morning is another time that you shouldn't be testing ketones, and after a meal, because of the release of malonyl coenzyme A, which alters the glucagon to insulin ratio. It would also indicate that you are no longer creating ketones. Even after extensive exercise, when you're ketogenic, you would expect ketones to be elevated. But in fact, it's the opposite. Now, you were shocked there, Steve, because yours went to 4 points something, I think you said. When I did that continuous blood glucose monitor, when I ran that 10K in Kempton a few months ago, mine went up to 10.6. 10.6, and soon recovered, within 30 odd minutes. So it's not anything to be concerned about if you are not registering ketones, because it's almost a false reading, if you like. Certainly not to be concerned with. Go on, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, it's all right. So, yeah. Now, Rich sort of told me off there for doing that, but I was only doing it for the experiment. I actually never test my glucose or ketones. I just trust my body to do it. But I thought for the video, it would be pretty handy. But I was actually doing it to stop people worrying, because I know people do it. Whether you say don't do it at this time, this time, or this time. And I think that's one of the things I learned when I did my qualifications for diabetes. Many people were told not to test 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes after eating, but after 2 hours, which I sort of understood, but also gave a very muddied result, because some of those foods really do spike your blood glucose and therefore have a huge impact on insulin.
But this sort of leads on to there's another comment. I don't mind if we jump a few comments, only because this sort of relays into Andy Sinclair's comment in regards
have you got the facility to put it
I
up
haven't, Steve. I can't. I can only see.
What time is it up?
7:12.
Is it from Andy Sinclair?
Yes, spot on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's put that on.
So only because
we'll come back to the people that we've missed. Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. So, Andy's asking there, if someone were to add carbs to the diet following carnivore, what carbs would you recommend? Well, the answer to that question would be white rice. And the reason being is white rice is lectin-free. So you'll be getting the carbohydrates without the detrimental impacts of the lectins. But coming on to the second part of the question, a sport like football, the body needs glucose to an extent. Yes, glucose, but not carbohydrate. Again, coming back to this whole gluconeogenesis, which is a segue from the last comment, the body creates sugar. And I don't eat carbohydrate whatsoever, at least very rarely. And when I did this 10K run in 40 minutes at Kempton, and I'm new to running, so that may not be quick to the the serious runners who are listening, but it was incredible. It was a zone 5 effort for me right from the start, to which we are told that we need explosive power from carbohydrate. I don't consume carbohydrate, but what my continuous blood glucose monitor showed is that my body created glucose at a much higher level than someone who was consuming glucose. So my body created the glucose on demand. It needed glucose and it created it. Soon after, my ketone levels returned back to normal, but you do not need carbohydrate. And the reason that we are told within the community is that we're going to see a benefit from adding in carbohydrate. It comes from carb addiction or sugar addiction. Sugar is a drug and it's more addictive than heroin. People that I work with are constantly looking for this metabolic flexibility, becoming fat adapted. They work hard and hard and hard, and it takes 3, 6, even 12 months to become fully technically fat adapted, although fat adaptation is our natural metabolic state. So in essence, we're coming away from being sugar adapted, but we shouldn't look at working towards fat adaptation as being something special, because it's our natural metabolic state. But we see an awful lot of people within the community who work towards this dual-fueled approach, because they want to put carbohydrate back in, because carbohydrate is a drug. And again, it's more addictive than heroin. But in my experience, now I've experimented extensively with powerlifting, bodybuilding, sprinting, sprint work on the bike, which is all explosive stuff. Because any of the listeners who are regulars would know that I've recently started running and cycling. I do not consume any carbohydrate. I've ridden 112 miles on 0 carbohydrate, and I have done some fast sprinting on the bike with 0 carbohydrate, to the point that I've achieved several KOMs on Strava. So I'm the fastest in the world on certain segments on these explosive movements. And that is not fueled by any form of carbohydrates. You do not need carbohydrate to fuel these explosive movements. Creatine monohydrate can help. Creatine's an incredible supplement, not just for the muscles and for this explosive movement, for the phosphocreatine energy system, but also for the brain. But you certainly do not need carbohydrate. And I would I would air caution on experimenting with this as well, because it can become a slippery slope. Our friend Paul Saladino, for example, I believe that he's gravitated down that way through sugar addiction. He's come away from being full carnivore, and I think he had everything right. And now he consumes, silly amounts of carbohydrate. But again, it's working for him. It's working for him. But it's never worked for me. I've put carbohydrate in several times and experimented, and it has only ever caused me issues. It's only ever caused water retention, inflammation, headaches, fatigue, crashes, all sorts of stuff. So you do not need carbohydrate. The beauty of being ketogenic and carnivore for so long is you upregulate specific pathways and enzymes within the body, particularly the monocarboxylate transporters, or the MCTs, not to be confused with medium chain triglycerides. Once you upregulate these MCTs, the monocarboxylate transporters, the body utilizes the enzymes within the muscle at a much higher rate. So we do not need carbohydrate for explosive, intermediate, or endurance exercises whatsoever. But if you are going to put carbs in, put them in from white rice, because white rice is lectin free. And just to come back to the amount of carbohydrate that you wanted to put in. Sorry, Steve, I can see you grinning there. I have to get this in really quickly. I did a podcast with Professor Tim Noakes recently, and he was saying that at any time the body does require any form of glucose, it requires 5 to 10 grams of glucose. So you do not need 50 or 100 grams. These figures were formulated by the sugar companies in order to get you to buy their sugary energy drinks. The body needs 5 to 10 grams per hour. Now, this amount your body is well capable of processing naturally, so you do not need any exogenous carbohydrate whatsoever. But if you are going to put it in, 5 to 10 grams is more than enough. You do not need 50. You do not need 100. And 5 to 10 grams is not going to pull you from a ketogenic state.
Yeah, you see, from the biochemistry book here, I have Jeremy Berg is the main author. That's where that comes from, the amount of sugar or glucose you need. And that's because the brain, over a 24-hour period, on average, needs about 120 grams. So the 5 grams that we're talking about that you should have in your body at any one time, that's where that comes from. And what Tim Noakes is saying, and I've got to go, ooh, yeah, Tim Noakes, that's good. Is if you've got these extra demands, and the central governance theory, which it is a theory, says that you're going to stop exercising. Oh, actually, I'm giving it away. I'm not going to say. So what they should do is watch that video. There you go. A little bit of a teaser there.
Yes.
So Herbert now has got a question, and I think this one is for you, Rich, in particular, because it talks about keto electrolytes plus. I'm on almost the lion diet. Well, what's that mean? Almost the lion. It's a sort of tiger diet. I understand that I do not need additional vitamin C. Also, I do not lean to sweeteners. Do you have any comments? So yes, it is for you, and it, Rich, that one.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a product of mine. The electrolytes that I make are genuinely the best on the market for a number of reasons. We've added molybdenum, selenium, and astaxanthin. We haven't added any calcium, because calcium supplementation will increase the risk of cardiovascular disease by 15%. And the ratio of sodium potassium is like 1.2 to 1. And the reason being, potassium is depleted when we consume more sodium. So the more sodium that we consume, the more potassium that we need. We need generally a ratio of 4 to 1, but most of this is obtained from the lifestyle that we live in, i.e. eating lots of meat. So for example, a piece of red meat contains a ratio of 4 to 1 potassium to sodium, so more potassium than sodium. But because we're keto carnivore, insulin's dropped, it's signaled the kidneys to release the sodium, which leads to a sodium deficiency. So we salt our meals with lots of sodium, but this leads to a potassium deficiency. So we need lots of potassium. On top of that, I've added astaxanthin, which is 550 times more potent than vitamin E as an antioxidant, 800 times stronger than coenzyme Q10, and 60 to 80 times stronger than vitamin C. Astaxanthin is a natural compound that is synthetic astaxanthin also, which most of the companies, when they say that they have astaxanthin, it's synthetic, but my version is natural because it comes from salmon. That's what gives salmon the pink color. Synthetic versions are made in a lab, and they are 21 times less effective than a normal astaxanthin. And astaxanthin is the only compound on the planet that is a true antioxidant. So when we look at plants as being antioxidants, these are in fact pro-oxidants because they begin their journey by activating the NRF2 pathway, which is an oxidative stress pathway, and it's the same pathway that's activated through the ingestion of arsenic, lead, mercury, and all these other nasty compounds. So if we are to believe what people tell us in regards to what is an antioxidant in plants, then we also must resign to the fact that ingesting mercury, lead, arsenic is also beneficial to the body because it activates the same system and it will give us the same response in an elevation in glutathione. So those are the benefits to astaxanthin. Now, coming back to the vitamin C, no, you don't need the additional vitamin C, and sweeteners are not, they're not required. But you and I, Herbert, are super elite. I'm carnivore. I use these electrolytes because the ratio is incredibly well, and I find drinking water boring. So the vitamin C is what actually gives it most of the sweetness. So there's very, very little stevia in there whatsoever. But they are incredibly refreshing, and it makes me want to drink more water. But I do have plans to make a complete unsweetened version with no vitamin C and no sweetener whatsoever. So I have some of these here with me, which I will be sending out to a few people who have asked for samples to get their feedback, because unfortunately, the vast majority of our community are not as strict as we are. And this unsweetened electrolyte, in effect, tastes like salt water, seawater, if you like. There are very few people on the planet, bar yourself and myself, who would quite happily drink this because we know the benefit. But 99.9% of people would not entertain drinking it. If you look at some of the comments that I've received on Amazon, for example, people are so, this is the best electrolyte, hands down, on the market. Some of the comments that I've had, absolutely disgusting. It's too salty. It's an electrolyte. It's meant to be salty. But these reviews that you get on Amazon or any business are absolutely detrimental, when what people should be doing is contacting me directly and saying, oh, look, to be honest, I didn't like it. Why is there a reason that it's too salty? At least give me an opportunity to send them a refund or even explain the benefit of taking this, because even though the information is there on the listing, people do not take the time to read those listings and take in that information. And the worst thing about Amazon is that as a seller on Amazon, I cannot come back to any comments. So if you were to leave a negative comment on one of my products, I cannot come back and say, no, you're completely wrong, because this is the reason, or this is the reason that it's so salty, or this is the reason that it tastes this way. And I know most of the flavor or the taste is to do with the astaxanthin, obviously, because it comes from fish. It's got that salty, sort of fishy sort of taste, if you like. And the sweetener, the vitamin C, almost mask that to the majority of people and make it a little bit easier to consume. But for you and I and other of the elite carnivores, I am building a section on the website that's going to be dedicated specifically to the elite carnivore community. So as you know, I service low carb, dirty keto, clean keto, standard keto, all the way up to carnivore and every variation of carnivore. And again, there's different subsections of being carnivore, but there will be an elite section for all our carnivore friends, which will be sweetener free and vitamin C free. But it is going to be one of those products that only you and I, Herbert, and maybe Coach Stephen and some of the listeners here are going to use, because it is basically salt water. But that's the reason we've added it. Unfortunately, most people are not as dedicated as we are, and it's almost this incremental approach. If we can get people living the lifestyle, taking the electrolytes and benefiting, then they're more likely to live the lifestyle for longer. And through these education pieces, we can teach them and educate them into the benefits of being carnivore and pull them down our rabbit hole, so they are almost carnivore or on the lion diet, as it were, which is pretty much what I am. Yeah. And again, I get what you're saying in regards to almost being there, because I eat meat, eggs, fish, cheese. So I'd class myself as being 95% lion, if you like, or tiger, as Steve likes to put it. But I do eat red meat almost every day, but I do like to put my my oily fish in, as well as my cheese. I'm a big lover of cheese.
You see, the problem is with Amazon, if you were allowed to reply, Rich, they'd run out of bandwidth.
Yeah.
So it's a little joke. Come on, lighten up.
Yes.
I know it really worries you and it upsets me as well. But yeah, brilliant answer. And you can all, if you look on the screen, if you're listening on the audio podcast, you can go to ketopro.com. And if you're new to this, you get 10% off your first order if you use the code KETONEW10. So I know Rich likes to keep his light under a bushel when he actually talks about you purchasing stuff, but he feels very passionately about this because there is a lot of junk out there. And if I'm ever thinking any question ever comes up about supplements, my wife was asking about glucosamine the other day. First person I will ask is Rich, and that's not just flannel because he's sitting there, because this guy knows everything you need to know and more about supplements, what should be in there and what shouldn't. And you've got to remember, you know, it is a business as well. So if there are hundreds of people saying, well, I like your electrolyte, but could you make it a bit sweeter? A good businessman is going to supply that. All right. Even if they personally don't like it like that. I mean,
it is. You're right. And there is a benefit to this as well, even though, you know, some of the products that I stock and sell go against, you know, every fiber in my body. I also need to check myself sometimes and remember that I didn't wake up being carnivore. I gravitated into this incrementally. I made incremental changes. I began by being dirty keto. And if it were a case of making that switch to carnivore, I probably wouldn't have done it because I didn't understand. I wasn't educated enough. And it's through these incremental changes that I finally become carnivore. So we have to be a little kinder to our friends who are new to the market, who are new to the lifestyle, because even if they were to be low carb, they're going to see a massive benefit. If they were only to you know, even if they were to continue to eat carb but not get it from grains, then they're going to see massive benefit. If they're going to, you know, cut out seed oils, they're going to see massive benefit. And things like the electrolytes are products that allow them to maintain the lifestyle, gives them bounds of energy, because that's what creates energy, the sodium potassium pump, amongst all the other bits that we just mentioned. But yeah, you are right. It is something that I don't like to talk about an awful lot, but they are genuinely the highest quality product on the market.
You should be proud, mate, because they're great. And I didn't take any electrolytes until I met you, and I've used electrolytes every so often, and I think it's a great product. I really genuinely do, and I'm not on a kickback. I just think that. So let's move to some questions. We are only 14 minutes behind, but we'll try and get there. There's quite a few people just being nice. There's not questions all the time. So Bacon of Health says, I was 5 days into no dairy carnivore when I had a stress situation at work and my blood sugar increased and my ketones dropped 1.5 down to 0.6. Was it the stress, or am I imagining things? Well, firstly, you're not imagining things. If you took the measurement and that really happened. And absolutely, don't forget the stress situation is a fight or flight. You know, it is an adrenal response. And what do the adrenals do? They push your blood sugar up to get you ready to fight or fly off somewhere. So that seems pretty interesting to me. And I think I've covered it. But Rich, if you want to go on to that a bit more, that's fine.
Yeah, spot on. You're right. This adrenal fatigue leads to an increase in cortisol, and these together increase blood glucose within the body, but look, 0.6 is still producing ketones. So, you know, we get caught up in this range. You're still producing ketones in 0.3, you know, so it don't get caught up in the range. There's nothing you can do about stress other than meditation, maybe, and taking breaks. But it's and again, stressing of that is just going to make it worse. So just try to forget about it. And in an ideal situation, don't even test. If you're not straying from the diet, then you're going to be fine.
Yeah, but it's a good question because we talk about fight or flight responses quite a lot. Good old Matthew. Thank you, Matthew, for your continued support. In fact, everybody that's messaging, the nice messages where you're saying hello and all that sort of stuff, we haven't really got time to put up today. I'm sorry, because Rich is absolutely flying.
Sorry. And I would love to thank every one of you for the kind comments individually, but obviously I'm taking up too much time as it is. So thank you all. Thank you all.
Matthew said he took 3 grams of creatine a few months ago for 1 month, and it made you hold on too much water. Should I start taking a lower dose, 1.5, or does 2 pounds of red meat provide enough? That's a good question. As a lay person, I always think there's enough in the red meat, unless you're an absolute premier athlete, maybe. But let's hear Rich's opinion.
Yeah, So 2.2 pound would be a kilo, wouldn't it? And a kilo is roughly 5 grams of creatine. 5 grams a day is all you need, give or take. When I do supplement, I supplement with 5 grams pre-training and 5 grams after, but it will hold on to water, but it holds on to water within the muscle generally. It shouldn't hold it on to too much in the subcutaneous. And that's partly the reason that it increases strength, because it allows more leverage in the muscle, which is how those drugs on the market, the steroids like Dianabol, will increase strength in people who use them. But when they stop, the strength goes, but you don't lose muscle that quickly, which means it can only be one factor, and that's to do with the water retention in the muscle. If you are a sprinter or you're looking to do long distance, then that extra water could cause a problem. But I mean, unless you're competing and it doesn't cause an issue, then is there really a problem to having that extra water retention, as long as it's in the muscle and allowing you to lift heavier weights, for example? Although lifting heavier weights, coming back to something we've mentioned before, isn't essential either. So it comes down to your goal. But yes, 2 pounds of red meat will provide plenty of creatine.
Right, cool. That's good.
Short answer.
Just quickly from Copper's Carnivore Kitchen. I think that's changed, that name. But anyway, it's a good name. Last week was great, but I was very bummed we couldn't follow you guys and watch the end. Right, so we have sorted that out. Don't crumble at this at 8 p.m. I've already put the link in the comments. And as from next week, because there was some technical glitches, you may have problems tonight. I really doubt it. I think I've sorted it, but next week will be absolutely like butter. So yeah, at 8 p.m. there is a link in the comments. I will put it again in there right now, and that's a direct link. What I was using last week was a link in Linktree, and Linktree, believe it or not, don't want to promote anything that doesn't align with the WHO guidelines. So I've now got a direct link, so that should work, and that's at 8 o'clock. So we've got about 8 more minutes here on the wonderful YouTube. So here we go. We're trying to get to all your questions. Tam, hi Tam. See the names coming up. It's nice to have these loyal people. Hi guys, quick question. Please, can you tell me, I change what I eat, eggs and steak, and fancy some pecan and Brazil nuts, and OMG, that was a big mistake. I've had the worst stomach ache. Any advice? Right, can be blunt. Don't That's it. Right, great stuff. Well, that's good.
So, just to explain why really quickly, they contain lots of lectins and phytic acid, and the lectins will cause this intestinal permeability and lead to all sorts of issues. So keep the nuts out unless they are lectin free, which are macadamia and pili nuts.
That's good. Michael here. Hello, Michael. Yeah, is OMAD 1 meal a day and carnivore with equal fat and protein good in meal? Yes, that's a good strategy to try for some people. They can't get enough protein in with 1 meal a day. I'm not one to push 1 meal a day. If you're new to carnivore, I think sometimes 2 meals a day is going to be better, so you get fat adapted, and also you can eat the fat. So it's not just fat adapted in your body, but being able to eat that amount of protein and fat, digest it and absorb it. So I would never start with OMAD, but I would certainly look at that at some point to see if it works for you. Right. There we go. Right. We've got here from Cami. Something, I don't know that first word, but anyway, Stephanie Keto Person's video regarding Jen. Delighted to meet you's weight gain on carnivore. Jen started to get hypoglycemia and was having lack of sleep because of stress hormones. Oh, I see. Yeah. And that strange word should say watched. Yes. Let's have a look. Seems like I've heard of so many women that get issues with hypoglycemia and sleep deprivation because of stress hormones when they eat too much protein, in inverted commas, too much compared to fats. I had this problem as well. So not really a question there, just a statement.
I wouldn't say it's too much protein. I would just say that it's not enough fat. I don't think you can overconsume on protein, especially if you eat as nature intended, the fattier cuts. But I know there is a double-edged sword in regards to too much fat consumption as well, but we'll cover that maybe on the other platform.
Cool. Yep, that's good. We will on the other platform. Yeah. So just M. So that's Emma. Largely carnivore for over 2 years. Stephen knows my diet. Yes. Is there a natural? This is for you, Richard. Is there a natural topical application of amino acids that might heal dry, scaly skin still on my lower legs, or anything else?
What I use for dry skin, and I don't have any with me today, is tallow. So I use tallow. And in a previous podcast or recording that you and I have done, Steve, I said it was something like the Happy Butter Company, but it wasn't. It was nothing like that. And do you know what I'm going to do in between coming from this, going on to the other platform? I'm going to grab it in the other room because I'm going to give you the name of the company that's on there. And you'll see why I got confused with the name on there. But it tallow is what I put on.
Cammy's just following up. But a low, medium protein, very high fat diet isn't interesting to me. Tried it for a month. It was horrible. Felt worse than ever. Now I include some carbs and I eat more protein and sleep. Right. So that was that. Sashmo question. I was wondering if quercetin, like in organic onions, is bad for you in any way.
Yes.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, it is. And we'll get through these. Join us on the other platform and I will explain why in a bit more detail.
If you can remember that, that's great. When I'm 100% carnivore, I feel tired. When I eat some fruit, the tired feeling goes away. How long do I need to stay 100% carnivore before the tired feeling goes away? Now, this is interesting. This is a real live client because I wanted her to come on, but she is a very private person. But she was concerned when I said about the 20 weeks plus or minus 6, and she's a professional competitor in a sport. I'm not giving too much away. So she does a competitive kettlebell sport, which is incredibly difficult. And she was saying without the carbs, she was only able to do this twice and she was absolutely shattered. And I said, if you stick with it, don't fall into the trap of adding carbs. By week 26, if you're not back where you should be, or even better, then I'll be very surprised. And I did a coaching call with her this week, and wow, she said, I couldn't believe it. You were dead right. And not only did I get 2, I got 12. And my coach, yeah, he's off. The coach said to step up on the training because it was so amazing. Right. So Rich is going off. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I will just tell you that if you look in the chat, you will see that I've put a link in so you can watch the next hour. I'm sorry it's also cloak and dagger. I'm really not keen to be like this. Wow, you're aging backwards. It's incredible. He can't hear me because he hasn't got his earpiece in. But anyway, so I just want to thank everybody for watching this first hour. Hope we can see you in the second hour. Anything else you want to say, Rich?
Yeah, I was just going to jump on to the back. I don't know what you went on with in regards to that, but it is an adaptation process. Salt, sodium, potassium, really important. So make sure you're hydrated. And coming back to a point you made previously, hydration isn't just consuming water. Creatine can help with strength as well. But intense bursts of exercise will allow you to upregulate those monocarboxylate transporters. So keep doing what you're doing because it sounds like explosive movements. And as a pro athlete, you will upregulate those systems and enzymes a lot quicker. So it is just simply a case of staying hydrated, take electrolytes if you need to, make sure you salt in your meals with pink Himalayan or Celtic sea salt, utilize creatine. That will definitely help with strength and those explosive movements. And time, stick to it because those systems will adapt, I promise.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And we'll see you in the next hour.
In the next hour, see you in a minute.
Yeah. In a minute.